The Temple of Solomon was one of the greatest wonders in biblical history, a place of power, wealth, and wisdom. But have you ever imagined what life was like inside this grand temple? How did Solomon manage to handle 1,000 wives and keep everything under control? Today, we're diving into the daily life inside the Temple of Solomon and uncovering the mysteries surrounding the wisest man in the Bible. Life in the Temple of Solomon was grand and full of complexities. Imagine a place where wealth, faith, and power intersected intensely and constantly. Built by King Solomon's command, the temple was not just a religious center, but also a political and cultural symbol reflecting the peak of Israel's kingdom. Located in Jerusalem, the temple physically manifested the covenant between God and his chosen people. Its majestic structures directly reflected Solomon's wisdom and his relentless pursuit of perfection. Each architectural detail held deep spiritual meaning, and the pure gold ornaments gleamed under the sun, impressing anyone who approached. 1 Kings 10:23. Thus King Solomon excelled all the kings of the earth in riches and in wisdom. This verse summarizes the profound impact Solomon had, both internally and externally. His influence extended far beyond Israel's borders, and the temple was the crowning achievement of that power. However, life in the temple was more than just religious rituals. It housed a royal harem comprising 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, a fact that still sparks curiosity and amazement today. These women were not just companions for Solomon, they represented strategic alliances with other nations, strengthening the political stability of the kingdom. These women were not simply left aside. They were meticulously prepared daily with elaborate rituals, including scented baths with rare oils, massages to keep their skin soft, and aesthetic care worthy of royalty. The harem's routine was carefully planned to ensure that each wife was always at her best. The harem itself was like a small city within the temple. Stewards, guards, cooks, musicians, and even doctors moved around constantly to ensure everything ran smoothly. Managing such a vast number of people required impeccable organization, and Solomon himself made sure that luxury and order were maintained. But the complexity didn't end with the harem. The Temple of Solomon also served as an administrative hub for the kingdom. Political meetings took place regularly, and emissaries from other realms came to pay tribute and offer gifts. The image of Solomon, surrounded by advisors and wives, gave the temple an unparalleled sense of grandeur. The women of the harem were often trained in etiquette and proper conduct to represent the kingdom when needed. Their beauty and grace were not merely decorative, but diplomatic tools that helped maintain friendly relations with other nations. However, with so much cultural and religious diversity in one place, tensions inevitably arose. Some wives, coming from foreign lands, brought their own beliefs, creating a cultural clash that Solomon had to wisely manage. The influence of these women would later lead to the king's own spiritual downfall. But at that time, it all seemed under control. The temple's grandeur, combined with the elaborate routine of the harem, made life there both fascinating and challenging. Every architectural detail and daily ritual reflected Solomon's desire to create a space that glorified God and showcased his power to other nations. The temple's complex structure required priests and servants to always stay vigilant. Maintaining spiritual purity was essential, and every purification ritual served as a reminder of the sanctity of that place. At the heart of it all stood Solomon, the man who seemed to have it all: wisdom, power, and 1,000 wives, yet bore the weight of keeping it all in harmony. The construction of the Temple of Solomon was one of the most grand and ambitious undertakings in biblical history. It all began with David's desire, Solomon's father, to build a house for the Lord. However, the mission fell to Solomon, who with his wisdom and determination turned his father's dream into reality. The temple was erected on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, a sacred site also tied to the memories of Abraham and Isaac. 1 Kings 6:1. In the 480th year After the children of Israel came out of Egypt, Solomon began to build the house of the Lord. This marked the start of a project that would take 7 years, involving a colossal workforce of approximately 180,000 men, including craftsmen, laborers, and construction masters. The temple measured 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 45 feet high, constructed with quarried stones, so that no hammer or iron tool was heard during its building. This reverent silence symbolized the purity and peace that the temple was meant to represent. From cedar wood lining the interior walls to pure gold overlays, every element carried profound spiritual significance. The pure gold overlay was a spectacle in itself. Solomon enlisted Phoenician craftsmen sent by Harem, king of Tyre, to ensure the details were perfect. The gold-covered floors, walls, and sacred furniture gleaming in the light from strategically placed windows. The bronze pillars, named Jachin and Boaz, stood imposingly at the entrance, symbolizing stability and strength. 1 Kings 6:38. And in the 11th year, in the month of Bul, the 8th month, the house was finished in all its details. Solomon personally oversaw the construction, making sure every detail followed the instructions given by God to David. The temple's interior was divided into 3 sections: the outer court, the holy place, and the Holy of Holies. In the holy place, priests made offerings and tended sacred objects, such as the golden lampstand and the table of showbread. The Holy of Holies, housing the Ark of the Covenant, was accessible only to the high priest once a year on the Day of Atonement. The temple also had an outer courtyard where people gathered for celebrations and sacrifices. During its dedication, Solomon offered thousands of burnt offerings and prayed for the temple to be a center of forgiveness and mercy. The divine manifestation was so intense that a cloud filled the temple, signifying that God had accepted the house built in his name. The sacred furniture, including the bronze altar for sacrifices, the sea of bronze for purification, and 10 golden lampstands, was arranged to reflect order and holiness. Nothing was random. Every piece served a specific purpose in the sacred rituals. The completion of the temple was marked by 2 weeks of celebrations, attracting people from all tribes of Israel. At that moment, Solomon was not just a king, but a spiritual leader, guiding his people to a direct encounter with the Creator. The temple, with all its beauty and grandeur, symbolized the union between God and his people. Yet maintaining its sanctity was a heavy burden, and Solomon knew that any spiritual deviation could put everything at risk. The temple's interior was divided into 3 main areas: the outer court, the holy place, and the Holy of Holies. In the holy place, priests carried out offerings and took care of sacred objects, such as the golden lampstand and the table of showbread. The Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant rested, could only be accessed by the high priest once a year on the Day of Atonement. This space was considered the most sacred, as it symbolized God's presence among his people. The temple also featured an outer courtyard where the people gathered for celebrations and sacrifices. During the inauguration, Solomon offered countless burnt offerings and prayed for the temple to be a place of forgiveness and mercy for the people of Israel. The divine manifestation during this event was so overwhelming that a cloud filled the temple, indicating that God had accepted the house built in his honor. The sacred furniture also impressed with its wealth and symbolism. The bronze altar, used for sacrifices, the large basin known as the Sea of Bronze for purification, and the 10 golden lampstands were arranged to reflect order and purity in worship. Nothing in the temple was random. Every piece served a specific purpose in the sacred rituals. One of the most intriguing aspects was the wisdom applied in choosing materials and arranging areas. Solomon sought divine inspiration to ensure that the temple would remain a place of spiritual communion for generations. The abundant use of cedar wood, with its fragrant aroma, and the shine of gold, created an atmosphere of reverence and respect. The completion of the temple was celebrated with 2 weeks of feasts and sacrifices. People from all the tribes of Israel came to witness the temple's consecration. At that moment, Solomon was not just a king, but also a spiritual leader, guiding his people to a direct encounter with the Creator. The temple, with all its beauty and magnificence, represented the union between God and his people. However, maintaining its sanctity was a heavy responsibility, and Solomon knew that any spiritual deviation could put everything at risk. The glory of that building depended directly on faithfulness to God. If this deep dive into the story of Solomon is impressing you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to keep receiving more content like this. And don't forget to leave a like to help this message reach more people. The Temple of Solomon was not just a religious structure. It functioned as the administrative heart of the Kingdom of Israel. Besides being a sacred place, it symbolized the centralization of political and spiritual power under Solomon's rule. Keeping the temple running flawlessly required a complex and meticulous organization. The temple routine began at dawn. The priests, descendants of Aaron's lineage, were already in position to start the purification rituals. Before any activity, they washed in the large bronze basin known as the Sea of Bronze, symbolizing the spiritual purity needed to serve God. Each priest had a specific role, and a rotating shift system ensured that temple service was never interrupted. 1 Chronicles 24:1. The sons of Aaron were divided into groups for ministry. This division organized the priests into 24 groups that took turns serving weekly. Each division consisted of several families with clearly defined responsibilities, from lighting the lampstands to preparing offerings. In addition to the priests, there were also Levites responsible for music and singing. The songs sung in the temple were not just simple melodies. They carried deep meanings and accompanied moments of prayer and sacrifice. The musical instruments, crafted from noble materials like cypress wood and precious metals, filled the space with harmonious sounds that echoed off the gilded walls. Cleaning the temple was another essential task. With so many people, especially on festive days, maintaining the place's purity was a top priority. Levites took care of sweeping the courtyard, polishing the sacred utensils, and ensuring the space was always ready for worship. Maintaining the golden lamps was also crucial, as their light symbolized God's continuous presence. The scribes and counselors also played a significant role in the temple. Solomon not only prayed there, but also held political meetings and made administrative decisions. His wisdom was evident in every detail, from selecting officials to record important matters to managing the tributes brought as offerings. The stored resources were kept in special chambers, strictly guarded by palace officers. The temple's dynamics also involved a constant stream of worshippers from across the kingdom. For many Israelites, bringing an offering to the temple was not just a religious duty, but an act of devotion and gratitude. Animals for sacrifice were carefully inspected, as any flaw meant the offering would be rejected, following the Torah's strict standards. One of the most impressive moments was the daily sacrifice, performed both in the morning and at dusk. The smoke from the burnt offerings rose to the heavens, and the scent of burning meat mixed with the aroma of incense. The priests sang while the people waited in silence, reflecting on their sins and seeking redemption. Managing the temple's material resources was also crucial. Solomon received tributes from allied kingdoms and his own subjects, and much of these resources went towards maintaining the temple. Strict control over sacred goods ensured nothing was wasted or misused, preserving the integrity of worship. Besides the regular religious activities, there were festive moments that mobilized the entire temple. During celebrations like the Feast of Tabernacles and Passover, the movement multiplied. The sound of trumpets and joyful singing filled the courtyards, while priests coordinated large-scale offerings. These celebrations strengthened national identity and the common faith among the Israelites. The temple's grand administration reflected Solomon's personality, meticulous, wise, and capable of maintaining order despite the complexity. Every detail had a clear purpose, and under his leadership, the temple remained a symbol of devotion and power for many years. Solomon's harem was like a city within the Temple of Solomon. More than just a private space, it was an intricate complex that symbolized both the grandeur and the personal dilemmas of Israel's wisest king. The idea of a man with 1,000 wives seems almost mythical, but for Solomon, it was a daily reality. 1 Kings 11:3. He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines. These 1,000 women were not just personal desires, but reflected a political and diplomatic strategy. Each wife, especially the princesses, symbolized an alliance with a neighboring kingdom, consolidating peace and strengthening Solomon's status as a respected and feared king. The harem was a complex structure, housing not only the wives and concubines, but also the king's children and a large entourage of servants and officials. There were designated spaces for scented baths, rooms adorned with fine fabrics, and social areas where the women could gather. It was an environment of luxury and beauty, but also of intense rivalry and tension. Each wife had her own chamber, decorated according to her culture, reflecting the diversity within the harem. Women from Egypt, Phoenicia, and other regions preserved elements of their traditions, creating a cultural mosaic within the temple itself. Personal care was essential, with beauty rituals including aromatic baths, elaborate hairstyles, and dazzling jewelry. The wives were not isolated. They followed a well-defined routine, including lessons in etiquette, music, and ceremonial meetings with the king. Despite evident rivalry, some women formed friendships, particularly those from nearby nations. However, jealousy was never entirely absent, and the competition for Solomon's attention was ongoing. When the king visited the harem, it caused quite a stir. The wives prepared in advance, hoping to be chosen for the night. Preparation involved not only physical appearance, but also practicing dances and songs that pleased the king. Being chosen meant temporary prestige, but also sparked envy among the others. However, life in the harem wasn't just luxury and privilege. Some wives felt isolated and neglected, especially those rarely visited by the king. The expectation of gaining his attention could turn into frustration, leading some women to seek solace in spirituality or daily activities to ease boredom and sadness. The diversity of the women's origins also posed spiritual challenges for Solomon. Some wives maintained distinct religious practices, worshipping foreign gods and introducing rituals that later influenced the king's own spiritual decline. This blend of beliefs contributed to Solomon's eventual spiritual downfall when he started building altars to pagan gods to appease his wives. The children of Solomon were also part of this complex dynamic. With so many mothers and siblings, competition for attention and recognition was intense. Some children stood out due to their mother's status, while others remained in the background, creating an environment of rivalry and intrigue. The harem staff also played crucial roles, ensuring the women's safety and well-being. Stewards, eunuchs, and guards maintained order, while cooks prepared sophisticated meals reflecting the wives' diverse cultures. Managing such a large and diverse group was a daily challenge, and any failure could result in serious issues. Despite the wealth and seemingly privileged life, the harem was a place of complex emotions and, at times, loneliness. Solomon, despite being the wisest man of his time, could not be present for all his wives, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty. The harem's grandeur was both a symbol of power and a reflection of human vulnerability, showing that even the wisest man could become entangled in his own choices. The Temple of Solomon was not just a place of traditional worship. It also carried an air of mystery and supernatural power that fascinated both the Israelites and foreigners. Solomon's very presence in the temple sparked rumors about special abilities and hidden knowledge. The king's fame wasn't just tied to his practical wisdom, but also to what many believed to be his unique spiritual power. One of the most intriguing stories involves the famous Ring of Solomon, According to ancient traditions and tales passed down through generations, Solomon possessed a ring engraved with the name of God, granting him control over demons and spirits. With this power, he was said to have accomplished impressive feats, including the construction of the temple itself, by commanding invisible forces to aid in the work. Ecclesiastes 7:28. One upright man among 1,000 I have found, but a woman among all these I have not found. This statement, though seemingly unrelated, reflects the complexity of Solomon's life. Surrounded by people and wives of different beliefs, he struggled to maintain his connection with God while dealing with various spiritual influences. The rituals performed in the temple were also laden with deep symbolism. Burning incense, for instance, was not merely an aesthetic or fragrant gesture. The incense symbolized prayers rising to heaven and simultaneously purified the environment of any evil presence. Using rare ingredients like pure Arabian incense emphasized that only the best was offered to God. Known for his wisdom, Solomon also explored areas of knowledge that today would be considered esoteric. Historical and literary records suggest that he studied ancient texts on magic and astrology, seeking to understand the universe's mysteries. Some believe that his relentless quest for complete knowledge led him to practices that would later be seen as heretical. The Song of Songs, one of the works attributed to Solomon, reveals his most human and passionate side. The poem intertwines physical and spiritual love in symbolic ways, and many scholars view it as more than just romantic expression. It's also a reflection of Solomon's quest for balance between divine wisdom and human passion. The poetic metaphors and mystical allusions highlight the complexity of his thoughts. During temple rituals, priests used objects believed to hold spiritual properties, such as the Urim and Thummim, stones used for divine decision-making. Solomon understood the importance of these rituals and made sure to preserve tradition, even as he introduced new elements that some considered bold. Another curious aspect was the belief that Solomon could converse with animals and understand the hidden languages of nature. This ability was thought to result from his divine wisdom and deep connection with creation. Stories about birds bringing messages or animals acting intelligently at his command became common among the people. However, the darker side of his quest for knowledge surfaced when he began adopting practices introduced by his foreign wives. In his later years, influenced by their beliefs, Solomon started building altars to pagan gods to please them, straying from the teachings he had followed since his youth. These supernatural elements surrounding Solomon helped build his legendary figure. Even today, both in Jewish tradition and Eastern legends, Solomon's power is the subject of mystical stories and speculation about his ability to control invisible forces. The blend of faith and mystery solidified his image as not just a wise king, but also a man surrounded by spiritual enigmas. Yet, despite all this power, the end of his life revealed that without spiritual balance, even the greatest wisdom could not save a man from his own failures. His downfall began precisely when external influences corrupted his genuine devotion, allowing practices that Solomon's reign began as a true epitome of wisdom and prosperity. However, as with many powerful leaders, the final years of his life were marked by a slow and painful decline, resulting from choices that contradicted his own principles. Solomon's downfall was not sudden. It unfolded quietly, gradually eroding the foundations of his faith and his kingdom. 1 Kings 11:4. For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods. This passage highlights the core of Solomon's spiritual decline. His wives, from diverse nations and cultures, brought beliefs and practices that directly conflicted with his devotion to Yahweh, the God of Israel. Solomon, once unwavering in his faith, began yielding to these external influences. Building altars to pagan deities such as Ashtoreth, Milcom, and Chemosh was a clear indication that Solomon was no longer the same man who had built the Lord's temple. The temple itself, once a symbol of God's covenant with Israel, now coexisted with places of worship for foreign gods. This situation bewildered and angered the more devout Israelites who saw their king abandoning the principles established in the Torah. The religious syncretism that took root in Israel not only weakened national faith, but also triggered a political chain reaction. The alliances formed through marriages with foreign princesses, once seen as stabilizing, now revealed themselves as risky. Other kingdoms, once respectful of Solomon's wisdom, began to see his moral and spiritual weakness. Furthermore, maintaining the lavish lifestyle of the temple and the harem demanded substantial resources. To support such grandeur, Solomon increased taxes and imposed forced labor, leading to public dissatisfaction. The wisdom that had once captivated the people now seemed distant and irrelevant to those burdened by heavy tributes and mandatory service. The people began to murmur, and the voices that once praised the king now questioned his leadership. Discontent grew louder when prophets declared that God was displeased with the king's choices. Divine wrath was imminent, and signs of the kingdom's disintegration began to appear. Indeed, Solomon's greatest downfall was not just personal, but national. After his death, the kingdom he had so painstakingly unified and strengthened fell apart. The northern tribes rebelled against his successor, Rehoboam, establishing the separate kingdom of Israel, while the southern tribes remained as Judah. The unity carefully built by David and solidified by Solomon crumbled rapidly. Solomon's story serves as a powerful warning about the danger of abandoning fundamental principles. His relentless pursuit of knowledge and power ultimately led him down a path where wisdom became secondary to passion and external influence. The man who began his reign by asking for wisdom to govern justly ended his life surrounded by idols and internal conflict. Solomon's writings, such as Ecclesiastes, reflect his late understanding and self-critique. "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity," he wrote, in a melancholic tone that seemed to acknowledge that neither wisdom nor riches could fill the void left by his disconnection from God. Still, his story also reveals the complexity of human nature. Solomon was not merely a king who failed, he was a man who intensely sought to understand the purpose of life. His journey mirrors how even the best intentions can be lost when not anchored in unshakable values. The temple life, once radiant with God's glory, became a bittersweet memory of a time when wisdom and vanity intertwined. Solomon, once revered as the wisest man on earth, ended his days realizing that wisdom without obedience is like a treasure without a key, inaccessible and ultimately meaningless. Life in the Temple of Solomon was filled with glory, but also marked by choices that led to decline. Ecclesiastes 12:13, "Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind." The example of Solomon teaches us that wisdom without obedience leads to ruin, and that power without purpose cannot sustain a nation. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to keep receiving fascinating content like this. And don't forget to leave a like to help this message reach more people. God bless you.